Board for 17 years, serving as board president in 2023. He was president of the Ohio School Boards Association in 2013 and president of National School Boards Association in 2020 through 2021. Prior to becoming a professor, Charlie clerked for the Chief Judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit and was a labor negotiator and litigator at the Wall Street law firm of Sullivan and Cromwell. Charlie will be addressing the financial ramifications. Sue Miller will share the state of play today in Upper Arlington and give a call to action. Out of respect for your time and to ensure we are able to cover everything, a time limit will be allotted for each section. Analysts and presenters, please note, I will signify when 1 minute is remaining by holding up a yellow card. When the allotted time is up, I will hold up a red card. Index cards were handed out at the sign-in table for any questions you may have. Maureen Reedy and Jean Melvin have been collecting those, and we will end with a Q&A segment. Before I sit down, I'm going to ask that you please mute your phones, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Phyllis. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. You forgot to mention that I'm also a notary public, so. Well,
Duly noted.
my topic is a whole course at the law school at OSU, so I'll have to be very brief. But voucher program in Ohio, as far as I'm concerned, kind of started back in the 1950s with Milton Friedman, a libertarian economist who recommended that the government get out of education except to provide a voucher. Now, the school or the southern states during that period of time were opposing the court decision, the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education, and so you kind of use this voucher idea to fund private schools as opposed to integrating their school systems. And in fact, in one county in one of the southern states dismissed, or they just eliminated the public system and provided vouchers. Of course, the minority kids didn't have any place to go to school. So that's kind of how this voucher thing started. Now, Friedman changed his mind a little bit later on in life, and before the American Legislative Exchange Council, that's ALEC, that group, he said that public school, the system was kind of a mistake to have public education, and that parents ought to be solely responsible for the education of their kids, and they should pay for whatever education the kids get. So that's kind of how the voucher scheme kind of originated. President Reagan came along and he appointed a committee on education, and he came out with what was called a Nation at Risk report. Most of you probably heard about that. It's a fraudulent report. Really was misconstrued. They misconstrued the data. And when that report was issued, Reagan came out and said, well, this report confirms that we need vouchers. Well, from that point on, from Reagan on, most of the presidents, Democrat and Republican, have not been champions of public education. In fact, I think Jimmy Carter was the last president who was really a champion of public education. He had been on the school board, so he knew something about public education. George Herbert Walker Bush, as president, he picked up the voucher deal. I remember he came to Ohio on November 25, 1991, to pitch vouchers in Ohio. November 25, 1991. So this voucher scheme in Ohio has been, a long time in coming. Now, George Hornivitz picked up that idea, appointed a committee, and the results of the report were predetermined. Essentially said we need vouchers. And then the people of Ohio weren't really excited about vouchers at that point in time. So they picked on Cleveland School District, one of the most assaulted school districts in the nation. and stuck the voucher program in Cleveland at Cleveland's expense. Now, originally the idea was we're going to get these poor kids out of a troubled school district. That was the pitch. Well, that was disingenuous because all along the voucher schemers had in mind that they were going to get to the universal voucher scheme, and that's been the goal all along. Now, from Reagan on, there's been this continual assault on public education. Of course, the voucher then, is the answer to a system that is not serving as well as some people would like. Now, the privatizers are very well funded. The education privatizers, the voucher proponents, very well funded. They have a lot of influential people pushing their agenda, a lot of wealthy people. The Koch family, that's the family that you know about because they all the rich. Betsy DeVos, the former Secretary of Education in the United States, she's a big proponent. She has, I think the last count, she only had 20 yachts. She has, a lot of money. Reed Hastings, the Netflix guy, he's going around saying, boards of education are just an artifact of the past, just a remnant of the past, just a relic of the past, that sort of thing. These people don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in public education. They don't believe in the public good. And so they're pushing this anti-public school venue of vouchers. Now, the threat is real, and the thing that's kind of disappointing to me is that a lot of people in our state don't know about the voucher scheme, and a lot of boards of education, superintendents, principals, administrators, and teachers have no clue as to the dangers of vouchers. And that's really disappointing to me. And I appreciate having an opportunity to talk at a meeting like this because we want to get the word out with regard to the voucher scheme and what it means to public education. Boards of education I think they have a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility to protect the taxpayers, the local taxpayers. The DeRolf decision in 1997 said that Ohio depended, the emphasis on property tax was too much. And here 25 years later, instead of fully funding public education, diverted $1 billion over to private education. Ignorant.
Next is David.
Great, thank you. It's an honor to be here, especially with Bill Phillips, who's been such a leader in this for so long. Thank you for your leadership. Okay, this is.
We can all feedback.
Those mics on.
Should we move the parent mics off?
Sorry.
That's.
I'm loud, but I assume you want. You there? Is that better?
Yeah.
Now it's not.
We don't want to turn them all off.
You can all hear me. I don't know if the Zoom can hear me.
The Zoom will pick you
Try it
up.
again,
Okay,
try it again.
it's off. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Whoa. So it's an honor to be here, Bill, particularly with you. I appreciate your leadership and I'm honored to sit on a panel with you and the others as well. Let me just say, I hope this is the beginning of many meetings like this. We have to start a brush fire that builds far bigger. And I actually think, and this is what I'm an optimist here, despite the pretty negative topic, I think we can do that. I think this is such a potent issue if people understand what's happening, that we can take something that I agree people don't know about and turn it frankly into potentially the most potent issue in Ohio when it comes to democracy. That's how big I think this could be if we do our jobs and try this. So, Bill mentioned it, what was the initial sales pitch that we heard 25, 30 years ago? The initial sales pitch was, although the plan was bigger, the sales pitch was, this is for kids in struggling urban districts who can't afford a private school to go to a better school, right? That was a sales pitch. They framed it well, that's sort of how people still think about it. But once you get rid of the restrictions, which they've done in Ohio and so many states across the country in the last year, that sales pitch no longer resembles what's happening. This data tells a story, and this, we have to figure out how to communicate this well, but the data shows that that sales pitch is at this point a complete lie. And if you go back to how Milton Friedman originally talked about it, all along they wanted what we're about to talk about to happen, and the sales pitch was basically just to frame it so people would accept it. So I mentioned the 3 items in that sales pitch. One, this was for people in quote unquote struggling public schools to go to private schools. To make that choice, right? We hear about choice. In 2018, 3.6% of the Ed Choice voucher recipients had not attended a public school in the prior year. So most had been at public school and moved over. In 2022, once you start getting rid of the restrictions, that number was 66%. Were not at public school when they grabbed the year before and then they grab a voucher. The number is even higher now. Where basically this program is being used by people who have already been to the private school to simply continue going to that private school. So that's the first part of the sales pitch that is simply not true. The second piece is for people who are struggling, and this is what's going to make the difference in going to that private school. Well, if that were your goal, you'd have pretty severe income restrictions, wouldn't you? Well, they got rid of those. So what's the number now? Only 14.9% of the Ed Choice recipients in 2023 were low income. The numbers, and there's some really people doing a great job of digging up this data. The numbers on the income levels that are now grabbing up these vouchers are staggering. There are, I think the number is, let me find my data here. There's currently $1.3 million of our tax dollars subsidizing the private school tuitions of families who make more than $250,000 a year. There are more voucher recipients, new voucher recipients coming from families that make more than $150,000 a year, let me say it slowly, more than $150,000 a year than families making less than $120,000. 9 out of 10 new voucher, Ed Choice vouchers are going to subsidize folks who could already afford to send their kids to private school. So it's not people who were at the public school in the first place. Secondly, it's folks almost entirely now, because they got rid of all the restrictions, who could already afford the private school. And third, of the folks of the sliver of kids who are going from a public school to a private school, they're almost all going to worse schools. They trace the data. This is staggering. They trace the data of the handful of kids who did go from a public to private school. And they found that the decline in test scores was almost twice the decline of test scores that happened when kids were out of school due to COVID. So we're up to almost $1 billion by next year to pay for kids who were already in private schools to stay at the private school they could already afford to go to. And of the very small amount that have moved, we're literally subsidizing going to a far worse education environment. That's what it's become. And as Bill said, they didn't sell it that way 25 years ago, but you read the history, that was always the goal. It's to basically blow up the public school system. It's to get rid of maybe the most important sort of public good that America has sort of agreed on for centuries, and saying it's over, we're going to turn into a free market system like a lot of other things that we have. And so that's the data. Now what's interesting is, and I don't know how much time I have.
4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay. What's interesting is, still today, and I believe this sincerely, and I think you all will see this if you look closely, most Americans still believe in a strong system of public education. It's one of the most common, despite how crazy politics is, it's still something most people believe in. That's why most moms of liberty candidates did so poorly last year. People didn't want crazy extremism running their school boards. It's why people despise the idea of Mike DeWine taking over the state school board. They want to say, they don't want the politicians in Columbus running their local schools. This is something that's still sacred. So the problem with their goal is it's actually really unpopular. And that's why for the most part, until the last couple of years, they haven't been bold enough to go for broke like they are right now with universal vouchers. The data I just described is happening in states across the country in the last 2 years. It's exploding. And I believe one of the only reasons why they're going for broke now in a way that they have not been brave enough to do in the past, they did the smaller system, they did that narrow system, now they're exploding it, is frankly tied back to gerrymandering. Because they know that as unpopular as everything I've just described is, they are in districts where they can get away with doing things that are unpopular. And that's why I think the numbers, that's why they're pushing it. They are going for broke right now. And that's why this is important that we do this today. And it's important that we expand as quickly as we can. Because in the end, I actually think that they are right in the end to be scared about this. And I think they sort of are. And the more people see the numbers, the more they will be. A couple of little canaries in the coal mine moments. In the last year, Republican state legislators in rural Georgia and rural Texas joined with Democrats to vote against this kind of universal voucherization that we're seeing in Ohio. Why did they do that? Because in rural Georgia and rural Texas, they know what folks in rural Ohio know. Apparently the gerrymandered legislators don't know it yet, but the people do. Which is that you destroy that public school through nonsense like this, you just destroyed the center of that community. All over the state, suburban, urban, and rural, but in rural in particular, that's it. There's no place to take that voucher. You shut down that school or weaken it, that's it. That's it. And so you see now those Republicans they then get attacked by the Vouchers money and ALEC money and Koch brothers money. But the fact that even those Republicans in those rural districts voted no tells you that they even understand how unpopular this is. There's a lot more data, by the way. I really want to give credit. The Cleveland.com has done a great job recently. They literally walked through, they showed in Cleveland, greater Cleveland, the broader area, and my sense is the data will be the same everywhere, that what I just said more broadly is happening at a school by school level. That these suburban communities are seeing explosion of vouchers, largely in well-off communities, even though the public school numbers aren't going down. Well, why is that? Because the people grabbing the vouchers were already in the private schools. They also showed, by the way, that the biggest expansion of vouchers is happening in the most well-off parts of Ohio, well-off suburbs. That's who's grabbing it. It's not at all serving that initial sales pitch I talked about. So bottom line, all I'll say is, and then we'll keep talking, we need to get the word out. Is that the 1 minute or is that the time?
That's the 1 minute.
1 minute, okay. We need to get the word out. And I know we have folks from Hilliard here. My attitude is get every single school district on the list of plaintiffs in this lawsuit and do this in every one of these districts. We need people to start explaining why they care about their local public schools, which they do. And we need to start explaining what the legislature is doing, which in the end is a mortal threat to public education in the state of Ohio, in community after community after community. So I'll offer myself to help do that, and my hope is we can build and build and build, because once people know what's happening again, they can't stand, I saw polling on this, they can't stand that the governor took over the state school board, which will bring all of this discussion behind closed doors. They didn't want extremists on their school board destroying public schools. Not only in more progressive parts of the state, but in more conservative parts. And so that shows you that if we communicate on this the right way, if we explain what's really happening, I think we can actually communicate with folks all over Ohio and build momentum to stop what's happening. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to the conversation.
Okay, who had me following David down? I feel so privileged to be up on this stage with this group of people. I've known Bill since I was a reporter and, I think if things, we should see a lot of Bill Phillips school buildings all around this state. There's been no one who has fought for public schools. And then I want to say that, we're not anti-private schools. We just kind of agree with Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, I support private schools and I support parents paying for private schools. But I'm going to talk to you about the 5 counts, and here's some really good news. This November, vouchers go on trial in Ohio. This November, right here in Franklin County, in Judge Jiza Page's court. So I covered the legislature for 23 years as a reporter. I was there in 1991 when David Brennan led George Voinovич's commission on school choice, and then profited millions of dollars by the things that he implemented with the governor. But and the legislature has a way of creating their own reality. When I covered the state house, lawmakers used to joke among one another, what's a little constitution between friends? Because they get to define reality unless we take them to court. As David mentioned, these blogs, these fights, Vouchers Heard Ohio groups are popping up all over the country because they see this robbing of the treasury and of the public school funds. And so in some cases, they're going to the court, like we are, because we can't go to our legislature and our governor. Sometimes they go to the governor, sometimes they go to lawmakers. We have 5 counts. All 5 counts have been accepted by Judge Page. The first count is a really simple one. If you look at the Constitution, and we believe that this is so clear, that's the 4th one. Yeah, I'll get that. I'm sorry.
Later.
That's the 4th count.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. That's right. The first count is really simple. We believe that Judge Alito reading this would agree with us. Because it says, there shall be a single system of common schools, a single system. What's occurring is a separate and unequal system of private schools for the wealthy, as David mentioned. This is a refund and a rebate. And when you hear the word school choice, that is such a myth. Because if you can't afford to take your voucher and then spend more money, because the private schools are now upping their tuition, grabbing all the public funds they can and still charging tuition. If you can't use that voucher to get into a school, you can't use it. So this is, that's our first count. The second count is, as Bill mentioned, the system of funding public education was ruled unconstitutional 4 times beginning in 1997. Each time the ruling said that a system that's over-reliant on local property taxes is unconstitutional. What are we doing right now? We're taking money out of the same line item. Like, they don't separate this money out. If you go look at the budget, you can't find a line item for Ed Choice private school vouchers. What you find is a single line item for public schools, and in that line item, the money for private school vouchers is included. Because they don't want you seeing that public school money is going up like this, while private school voucher money is going up like this. So what's happening is this is becoming an over-reliance on local property taxes. We have a system that's underfunded. I read the other day Senator Andrew Brenner from the Delaware area. He actually said in response to a reporter's question that there's plenty of money when they saw the skyrocketing out of control costs. Here's something really interesting about Ed Choice. There's no cap on the spending. I covered the State House for 23 years. I never saw a single program go through the budget where there wasn't a cap on the spending. There's no cap on this. If you apply, it's like Field of Rich Dreams, you will get the money, no matter what it costs. And Andrew Brenner just reinforced that by saying, we have plenty of money. If we have plenty of money, why aren't we funding public schools at a constitutional level?
Yes.
That's count 2. Count 3. Here's here is a really dirty irony of all of this. This was established supposedly to help poor and minority families escape schools that were not serving them properly. And the fact is, vouchers count 3 worsens segregation in this state. It makes it worse. Why? Why? Because you have in-district white flight, and you're leaving families behind because of financial status. And the fact is, count 3 is basically the private school operators, and that's the real choice. They're the ones who have the choice and the power in all of this. They get to set tuition. They get to say to a student, you don't have the academic standards to be here. You can't play for our football team, you're not getting in. You're disabled, you're not getting in. Maybe you're the wrong race, religion, whatever. They get it. They have all the power. The choice here is in the private school operators who are also raking in hundreds of millions of dollars. Hundreds of millions of dollars. We think this is unconstitutional. The 4th count is what Bill was pointing to. That's directly from the Constitution. And we have some handouts, you can get this. But basically, and this is, sometimes you hear about, folks who put our constitutions together at the federal level or state by state, that there was some ambiguity, or there's vagueness, or we don't understand what their intent was. What was the constitutional intent? Well, in 1871-72, there was a constitutional convention in Ohio, and there was a gentleman delegate who brought to the constitutional convention an amendment that would allow for public dollars to go to private religious schools. And it was soundly, overwhelmingly rejected. So there's a case here for this. And how they get around this in the court of law? Let's see what they do. The 5th is really just that all power rests in the people, the 5th count. This is our Constitution, this is our system, and we have the power to determine that. So I hope I'm going short so I can give my other
2
panelists more
minutes
time.
and 52 seconds.
But I want you to understand, we feel that each of these 5 counts, and Judge Page has accepted each of these counts, despite, keep in mind, as soon as we filed this lawsuit, Dave Yost, the Attorney General, went in on behalf of the state and made motions to dismiss it. But not only Dave Yost, the Institute for Justice out of Washington, D.C., a co-founded organization. These are front groups with puppets who work with them. And they went in and they also filed motions to dismiss, and that got dismissed. And just recently, we're trying to subpoena and depose Senate President Matt Huffman, who once said to the Dispatch, we pretty much do what we want in the legislature. So we want to ask him some questions. We want to put him, in front of an attorney and ask him some questions about this program that he has been pushing more than any other lawmaker. And he hired attorneys. He went to the Attorney General office, and so us taxpayers are paying for him to fight the deposition. Now, like Solomon, Judge Page kind of cut the baby in half and said, we'll give Senate President Huffman the opportunity to answer written questions. He doesn't have to sit and be deposed. Do you think he agreed to that? No. He appealed it to the 10th District Court of Appeals, and just last week unanimously, 3 judges on the 10th District Court of Appeals said to Matt Huffman, you need to answer some questions. Now, he has an opportunity to go to the Supreme Court with that ruling as well. But I'm going to finish up here and turn it over to Charlie Wilson. But I have one last thing, vouchershirtohio.com. Vouchershirtohio.com, you can go there, get a bunch of information, sign up, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Instagram. There's also an email you can sign up every Tuesday morning. I send out an email updating everyone on what's going on with the lawsuit. Thank you very much.
There you go.
You're okay, David? Okay, all right. Like David, thank you for the honor of being on this panel. This is truly accepted, a truly exceptional panel. Will Phyllis, David Pepper, Dennis Miller, are superstars in this area. So, thank you for this opportunity. First of all, I'm supposed to speak about the financial ramifications, but I want to get to something that I think sets the table for that. I have taught almost 1,000 law students, school law, education law, school policy, school funding. And many of them come into my classroom saying, why does it matter if kids are going to public schools or private schools or charter schools or voucher schools or home schools, as long as they're getting a good education? Well, let me tell you why it matters and why every single school board in the state of Ohio should support the lawsuit and resist the General Assembly's attempt to privatize education. First of all, I just want to clarify one thing that David said. We're not asking school boards to become plaintiffs in the lawsuit. We've got plenty of plaintiffs. We're asking school boards not to free ride, not to freeload, but to use a little bit of their resources to support the lawsuit. Lawsuits are not cheap. Lawyers are not cheap. I've taught more than 9,000 lawyers. They're not cheap. We need the help of everybody. Yeah, every single school district in this state will benefit if the lawsuit is successful, whether they contributed or not. But that's not what public education is about. It's not about, I'm gonna free ride. No, it's about the public good. It's about coming together. Public schools are democratic institutions, small d, democratic institutions that are the cornerstone of our democracy. And any school board member that believes in democracy should be supporting this lawsuit. Public schools include everyone. Voucher schools don't. Charter schools don't. They can cap their enrollment at 100 or 150 and say, well, if you want to come here, you got to go to a voucher. You got to go to a lottery or something. Public schools enrollment is open to everybody, no matter your circumstance. Public schools, unlike private schools and unlike many charter schools, protect legal rights. Public schools are available everywhere, in every community, and they are a resource to that community. Public schools open up their grounds, their gyms for youth sports. Not many private schools do. I was a visiting professor in Los Angeles and in New York City, and we lived real close to private schools. Those were beautiful facilities, but we couldn't get in. I thought the public schools were fine too, but they were, about a 2-mile walk away. So that's what public schools offer, is a resource for everybody. Public schools focus on equity and fairness. They're accountable to the public. There's democratic control. You don't like the direction of your school district? Vote the board out, okay? Try voting out the board of a voucher school or a charter school. You can't do it. There is no election. Public schools are transparent in how they spend their money. The state auditor comes in with a whole boatload of auditors and checks and makes sure every dollar we spend is being spent properly. Voucher schools don't have to do that. And I could go on, but the whole thing about public schools is they serve the common good. They're not about benefiting individuals, they're about serving the common good. Okay, I will now turn, for the sake of time, to my assignment. I'm like many of my best students. I'm a little bit of actually I'm a lot of a deviant. I hope a positive deviant, but I don't always follow the assignment, nor do my best students. One of which was, by the way, Judge Jackson Page, is a former speaker. I think she liked my classes, but anyway, the financial ramifications. Remember, as Bill spelled out and as David was talking about, each dollar going to private school vouchers is one less dollar available for public school districts. Why is that? Because there's just one pot that goes to public schools, to voucher schools, and to charter schools, just one pot. So every dollar that goes to voucher schools is a dollar less to fund the formula, which is underfunded. The General Assembly agrees with the fair school funding formula, they just haven't funded entirely yet, okay? And what is really troubling about this common pot is that there's no legal cap whatsoever on the number of private school vouchers that can be distributed. But there is a legal cap on how much the Department of Education and Workforce is called due now. I call it mildew, but due, Department of Education and Workforce. It used to just be the Ohio Department of Education, ODE, but there is a legal cap on how much it can distribute for education. It's got to stay within that pot. Aaron Roush, who is in charge at due of how all this money is apportioned, said at a conference for school board members and treasurers last December, when he saw the numbers of voucher applications coming in, that due to the extremely large number of applications for vouchers, the public schools will not be able to be funded at the level the General Assembly anticipated in the second year of the biennium. And right here in Upper Arlington, your treasurer looked at the projections for the second year of the biennium, and they look pretty good for Upper Arlington. But there's no chance that's going to be fully funded for two reasons. One of which is because your property values went up, so you're now deemed to be even a wealthier district. And that's true for Hilliard, that's true for Worthington, it's true for Dublin, it's true for Bexley, it's true for Gahanna and Westerville. So you're not going to get what you think you're going to get in the second year of the biennium. And he said it could be a rather substantial cut because there is no legal obligation for due to fully fund the formula. It's just supposed to give any money that's left pursuant to the formula to the school districts. So don't expect to get what you think you might get in the second year of the biennium because of the extremely large number of voucher applicants. Let's also not forget, as David said, that most of the Ohio voucher recipients now under the expanded voucher program never once attended public schools. I've got a neighbor who never once attended public schools, whose kids never attended public schools. But now, and he never dreamed he would get subsidized by the state. But now he's got a large family. He's getting almost $35,000 from the state while earning his over $1 million and living in his $3 million home. He's from local taxpayers, you and me. He's getting subsidized. He never asked for it, but I don't blame him. There's a tax deduction on the tax forms. I claim it, even if I think it's bad policy. Similarly, that's what wealthy private school families are doing in the state now. And before I go on here, I do want to make one point here about, think about how the vouchers came into existence in Ohio. It was not by a standalone bill. It would have never passed. That's not how vouchers came in. It came in the budget bill, which is often a 5 or 6 or 7,000 page document. It's buried in there with everything else. It's why strong pro-public school people vote for it, because we don't want to shut down our government like the House of Representatives sometimes wants to do at the federal level. But that's how it comes in. A standalone voucher bill would be so unpopular in this state, it would never pass. And they never attempted to do that. They introduced them, but then they always blended into the budget bill. And that's how they get vouchers in the state. But by the way, they don't even call it vouchers. They call it scholarships, ed choice scholarships. These aren't scholarships. I'm the biggest scholarship. I'm all for scholarships. But these aren't scholarships. These are subsidies for rich families. They're vouchers, which poll very badly. High percentage of Americans in Ohio oppose vouchers. So as David pointed out, and I've got the numbers here, but I won't bore you with them since I don't have a PowerPoint here. But the percentage of low-income voucher recipients is dropping very dramatically, even though, as David and Bill said and Dennis said, we were told that their sales pitch was that expanded vouchers would provide better educational opportunities to low-income families. They're not the ones getting it. Ohio's universal voucher program has been far, far more expensive than the Legislative Service Commission forced. That's what it was based on, and that's why those projections that came out when the budget came out for the second year of the biennium will not come out that way, because they never anticipated that people who already had kids in private schools would seek vouchers. Anyway, that's okay. So the bottom line is, this escalating cost of vouchers is unsustainable and is going to divert state revenue away from all of Ohio's public education schools, okay? And so what are the financial ramifications? First of all, and I think the one that should appeal to every single board member in this state, if they have any sense of their fiduciary obligation to protect their local taxpayers, is extended vouchers have, in other states that have done it and are starting to do it in Ohio, will result in enormous strain on the public school teachers' retirement system. Didn't think about that, right?
It's already a mess at all.
Yeah, but it's gonna get worse. Before it assessed the impact of vouchers on the state teachers' retirement system, they were proposing, the state teacher retirement system was proposing that the state legislature increase the school district contribution to the pension by 4%. 4%, it doesn't sound like much, but last time I looked at Upper Arlington's budget, your personnel expense is approaching $100 million. That means 1% is $1 million. So if vouchers result in the pensions needing another 1% of school district money, there's $1 million right there. You'll never have to pay that to support the lawsuit. You'll be saving money of the lawsuit. You'll be saving tons of money right there, just in pension costs. Because think about it, why do vouchers put a strain on pensions? Because private school teachers are not in the pension system. The public pension system requires that we have teachers in the system paying in all the time, and that those numbers of teachers paying in are going up, not going down. All their projections are based upon employment in public schools increasing, not a lot, but increasing some. Once you start to flatline that or cause it to decline, they're going to be coming to school districts for big amounts of money. They're also be coming to your current teachers for more money. There's two aspects about that. About 10 years ago, the teachers saw about a 35 or 40% increase in their contribution to the pension plan. They didn't nick, I was a school board member, they didn't nick school districts at that time, but there is a sense that they're not going to come back to teachers. They're going to go after school districts. It's politically much easier to go after school districts than it is to go after all the teachers in the state. So they're going to come after Upper Arlington School Board. They're going to come after the Worthington School Board. They're going to come after the Hilliard School Board. They're going to come after the Dublin School Board. If you're really interested in protecting your taxpayers' money, you've got to do everything you can to make sure this lawsuit is successful, and that requires resources. Voucher school teachers are not in the system. So as they grow, that doesn't help the pension system. And the only thing the pension system can do is, number one, increase contribution of school districts and teachers, and secondly, reduce benefits both to folks who are teaching right now and to retirees. Don't think for a second, retirees, that your pension, that what you're getting today is what you're going to get tomorrow. If this voucher program is as successful as it's been for this past year of getting so many kids into private schools. That's first of all. Secondly, reduce funding. As I already talked about that, is that every dollar that goes into a voucher is a dollar that's not going to your public school. Okay? And I know that Upper Arlington, Worthington, Dublin, Hilliard, aren't getting anywhere close from the state what is required to educate a student, but,
I knew.
okay, I got my red,
Sorry,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so reduce state funding, also reduce support for operating levies and capital bond issues. My neighbor, who I said, he sends his kids to private schools, always has, but his view is, and he's always had a big levy sign out in his yard and a bond sign. He said, don't count on me ever supporting anymore. He said, everybody should just send their kids to private schools, the state will pick that up, I'm not gonna support your levies anymore. So up Arlington, don't think for a minute it's gonna be as easy to pass levies as more and more of your parents send their kids to private school subsidized by the state. And remember, financial ramification, private schools don't have to accept students that are difficult to educate, students who have special needs, students who have behavior issues. Those kids are, God bless their souls, and I'm all for them. Public schools educate them, and we spend a lot of money educating them. But kids like my kids who don't have those, they're pretty cheap to educate, but we could level it out. But when my wife and I want our kids going to a public school where virtually every other kid in the classroom had behavioral problems and other issues that resulted in the private schools not accepting them. And then finally, a minor amount, but it is significant. We've got to transport every single kid who goes to a private school or a charter school. And so the more kids from Arlington that are going to private schools, you've got to pay for those. We've got so many buses in Worthington that a Worthington school kid has never set foot on. Only private school or charter school kids have ever been on. A very large number of our bus drivers never bus kids going to Worthington schools. They're kids who live in Worthington, who are going off to St. Charles, Columbus Academy, Columbus School for Girls, Wellington, right here in Arlington, and so forth. So that's it. And I do want to conclude on something though. We absolutely must devote energy, time to supporting public schools and telling a story about public schools. Let's be crystal clear. On international test scores, the United States usually scores around 25 to 30. It's been very constant. It hasn't fallen and it hasn't gone up. The public school kids from low poverty schools outperform any country or any subsection of any country. It's private schools that are bringing us down. It's charter schools, and to a large degree, it's these non-chartered private schools that Huffman and others are talking about funding massively. And these are kids that aren't even learning biology. They're learning that dinosaurs and human beings walked on the earth together. I mean, imagine how they do on these international science tests. Not well. I mean, I've seen the Department of Education, the US Department of Education data breaking it down. Again, not every private school has CSG or Wellington or Columbus Academy. Most of them are these very low performing private schools. That's where most kids with vouchers are going. If you care about Ohio, please support the lawsuit. Do everything you can to get your school board member to vote to support the lawsuit. I'm not talking about becoming a plaintiff. We already got plaintiffs.
And
We need
Charlie,
support.
$2 per student
$2 per student.
Yeah.
Per year.
for Arlington,
It's,
times 6,000.
Less than that.
Yeah.
it'll take a long time to get to
Yeah.
$1 million, that 1% of your personnel budget, that just a 1% increase in state teacher retirement system contribution. All right, sorry, I went over. Well, democracy depends on saving, and all Ohio depends on a strong public school system. I wish I could get my kids to move back, but they said, no, you got vouchers, you
All right.
discriminate trans students, et cetera. They're not.
Yeah, I'm gonna go fast. So, Charlie, I'll yield any time back to you that I might have left.
And Sue, can we just mention to write down any questions
Yeah,
now?
start writing down your questions now.
We're gonna collect.
Yeah, Maureen and Jean will collect them and, curate them, make sure there aren't any repeated. Do I have to talk in the mic? Okay,
Zoom people are appreciated.
okay, can you guys hear me? I feel like it's not on. You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the school board members who are here tonight from Upper Arlington. Thank you, Dr. Sadiani, for being here. And thank you to Liz Stump for giving her seat to President McKenna, although I don't think Jenny made it.
I believe Lori Trapp was on Zoom.
I'm sorry?
I believe.
Well, okay, so Lori joined us by Zoom. Well, that's progress. I hope our guests take note of which board members have chosen not to respond to the invitation. Also, I brought 2 copies of the book, The Death of Public Schools, to lend anyone who wants to read about the history of vouchers and how we got to where we are today. If the books make their way back to me, great, but I'd much rather you pass a copy along. The small group behind this evening's event has been working to get the Upper Arlington School Board to do the right thing for over a year. We are educators, business people, grandparents, parents, and we're all taxpayers. What we all have in common is a passion for education and wanting what's best, not just for the Upper Arlington kids, but for all kids who attend public school in Ohio. Our goal is, and always has been, simple and clear. Put this lawsuit on the board agenda so it can be discussed. Last year, we met with our former board president and the acting superintendent. We sounded the alarm during via testimony at the April and June board meetings. We brought members of this panel, as well as other high-ranking experts, to a meeting with our new superintendent, not just once, but twice. This year, we met with our new board president, the past president again, and our newest board member. That's Liz Stump. We have written letters. We have emailed. While the excuses for not adding this to the agenda have changed, the message in those excuses is consistent. This is not a priority for Upper Arlington. So here's where we are now. It has not been enough to talk about the financial impacts to this district or even the moral injury to this community because of the message it sends to the less fortunate districts. We need you to add your voices to ours. Please stand up for not just Upper Arlington Public Schools, but for public education everywhere. You guys have been given, you guys have hopefully picked up a sheet of paper, which lists a number of options on how you can get involved, and it ranges from, just going to a school board meeting in support of those of us that are testifying, all the way up to testifying. Mostly what we need right now, is outreach to other districts. So if you have contacts in other school districts, please give them my contact information, okay? I think it's on the handout. We need to have this happening across this state, and it needs to happen sooner rather than later, okay? So we need all of you. And I think you guys are great for being here, and I hope all of you will fill out that sheet of paper, expressing what ways you're willing to get involved.
And Sue, can I just say, we have, Bexley has joined us, Worthington has joined us, Westerville has joined us, Reynoldsburg has joined us, Southwestern has joined us, Columbus has joined us. So, we've got a lot of Central Ohio, we're growing strong, and we've got Hilliard folks here, Dublin folks here. So, anyway, questions, is that next?
Yep, we're on questions now.
Okay, any questions? Let's go.
We just ask or you want to read them?
Well, we don't want duplicates, if that's okay. Or
You were just gonna read off the cards.
yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, let's do a few of the ones, and if it's not duplicated, is that
You
good?
need to have a money, or the Zoom people want.
Okay. Okay, I'd rather have the wireless. Is there a wireless? Yeah. Okay. One of the questions is the Vouchers for Ohio lawsuit taking away the John Peterson scholarships for students with autism or other learning disabilities?
We're only challenging the Ed Choice Voucher Program. Everything else we're not challenging.
So those of us who I know we have, you work with the CHIP, the Columbus Hearing Impaired Program. So children with on the autism spectrum or dyslexia, their state aid is not going away with this lawsuit. I've heard the Ed Choice Voucher Program gives, well, it's up here. It gives UA an average of $585 per pupil, state funding, if you look up here. But yet the state funding to voucher students is $8,407 per pupil for 9 through 12, or $6,165 per pupil for K through 8. With, again, public school, UA public school students getting $585. Is that accurate? Is that accurate? That disparity?
You're defining it, Scott.
Absolutely it is. There is no, not even the poorest school district in the state gets as much as Wellington or Thomas Academy or CSG get from the state per student.
Why?
Where's that number from? 585?
Andrew Geisfeld, the upper treasurer, who you've met, our group has met with.
You need to hold the mic, because you're on Zoom. Is there another?
Jim Collier, you've been in touch with Andrew Geisfeld. Anything to add to that average?
No, it's an average, so for students with no special needs, there's a range, there's a formula for K through 8 or 9 through 12. Suffice to say that the low number is in the low 400s per student, up to students with special needs get up to $2,100 from the state. The average for Upper Arlington is $585. So it ranges depending on the grade level and does the student not have special needs. Does that make sense?
Is there something else with
So
it?
low 400s up to 2,100.
Is there something else on it? Because there's 12 million
Wait,
coming
can
up
you
last
put your
year.
question on a card,
Oh, yeah,
please?
Okay, thank you. Trump has said, "I love the uneducated." Can you please comment on how the attack on public education through vouchers is connected to the political agenda of the right?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that, although I mean, Trump said that. Well, the problem with the whole topic is how many issues on the far right it combines into one. And that's why it's so explosive for them. That's why they're so aggressive. This satisfies the need for someone to grab big public money. ECOT, other for-profits, all the low-flying for-profit schools that are about to be created to grab some of these vouchers. So to the extent we've seen the far right being eager to grab every public dollar they can, this is great for them. And they'll give some of that money back, like they did with ECOT, to the politicians who are making this all happen. So there's greed involved. Then there's the religious right involved. This puts a lot of dollars into religious right schools. What's the group, CCV? I'm an outsider, I'm from Cincinnati. Yeah, they're right across from the State House, they're starting a school, right?
They bought a $5 million building.
Yeah, so they're gonna use it for their religious right education, that sounds like, Charlie, you're already studying. And you described some of the curriculum, apparently. And then there's sort of the broader attack on just the notion of public education as a common good. They simply reject that. Andrew Brenner rejects that. They hate public school teachers and public school unions. So this is a great way to attack them. They want their money from the pensions. They make a lot of money out of investing that money, right? But they hate the unions and they hate the teachers. And then you have maybe a broader interest in having folks not as, there was a book I've been reading lately. There's a lot of scary books on antecedents of this, but if you look at past authoritarian regimes in other countries, often they start by attacking good education. So the reason this is such a powerful movement that's in Arizona and Florida and Missouri and Tennessee and all these places is because multiple interests on the right benefit from it. Again, money, religion, the broader ideology, hating unions. And that's why it's, whenever you see those, even one of those interests, they'll go to bat for it. But when you see them all align around one issue, it explodes. That's what they're doing. And that's why what we have to do, frankly, is fight back fiercely. Here's I know I'm talking a little bit, but let me just say this. My great worry here is they know it's unpopular, but by going for broke right now, they can set something in place that is impossible to undo. Because once they have, let's say, hundreds of thousands of families like your neighbor, or with less money than your neighbor, used to being able to have $8,000 per kid, they know that down the road, and by the way, and these schools are raising tuition, so they get really reliant on that public money. In 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years, when someone else comes along and say, you just destroyed the Ohio's budget, we have to change this, you have an entire world in Ohio saying, no, this is our life now. So unless we get ahead of this as quickly as possible, if this settles in 5, 6, 10 years, it'll be a lot harder to undo because so many people, this will be all they've known. And this will be the way they've been financing their kids' education from the moment they walk into kindergarten. So we've got to get to work quickly. That's why the suit's important. And that's why building a political movement is so important right now, because they're going for broke now. And if people get reliant on it, it'll be very hard to put the GE back in the bottle.
All the research shows that vouchers are more addictive than crack cocaine. They're like, they're like, try taking away people's social security or Medicare now, thank God it's impossible, but it's impossible. It's the same thing for vouchers. You can't just have literally hundreds of thousands of families protesting on the state saying, wait a minute, we counted on that.
Another question is, what is the average per pupil funding that Upper Arlington property tax supports? And I will say that Upper Arlington does have the highest property tax in Franklin County, and I've heard that it's 87% of property taxpayers fund. That's the amount of per pupil cost that the property taxpayers support here. Am I correct? 87%?
Jim's your guy.
87% of our entire school budget comes from Upper Arlington property taxes. That's the figure.
Okay. And one thing I will say that UA vouchers increased 2,264% this year. There were 11 vouchers in the year before, and currently there's 260 vouchers being funded. And almost all of the vouchers are refund rebate to families who have always been in private schools. That's quite a jump.
And that was with very little time after they expanded the program, so I guess it's gonna go a lot higher.
The next question is, why hasn't Upper Arlington joined the lawsuit? Charlie, you've met with the superintendent and school board president and school board members. Would you like to?
Because so far, 3 school board members have not indicated they would support putting it on the agenda and voting for it. School districts like Worthington voted unanimously to pay for it, we were one of the first 4 years ago. When it first started, frankly, The community, I've got more positive feedback from the community on that. Thank you, school board, for supporting public education. They understood that. And they understood that, our schools are of a quality that not too many of our parents, except the ones who already were in private school.
Who are the board members? Who are they?
In Worthington, in Arlington?
In Arlington. We're the ones that will not support today.
Well, yeah,
Kitty will
Nitty,
answer.
Nitty, she's asked for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's important for the names to get out.
yeah.
If I'm gonna email somebody, I wanna know who I'm emailing.
Right.
The only time our school board has discussed this was at our retreat, September. And in September, I indicated support for the voucher. And our two school board members, Nancy Teresa and his daughter, indicated a lack of support for the vouchers. And Jenny McKenna and Lori Trent said they needed more information. That's the only time we've discussed it as a board. And that's on board record.
So one of those board members is no longer on the board.
One is no longer on the board, yeah, and Liz and I can't talk about things that we will discuss publicly, and so before she was elected, she did indicate support for the voucher.
And may I add that this is why this evening is so important, because you're the feet on the ground here, you're the voice. And we have started a local district campaign that these UA, amazing Betsy, Sue, Jim, and others have joined and educated themselves and had meeting after meeting. But it requires, spreading the word like we're doing tonight. Thank you for being here. And we're hoping to do this in Hilliard, in Dublin, and, these events in different districts, but here we go. You guys are up and running and ready to go. So, thank you for being here.
So something you can do that's actually pretty simple. Go to the Upper Arlington website, school website. On there, the board members will be on there. And my advice is if their emails are listed, send them an email asking them to join the lawsuit or to explain to you why not. Then call them. After you sent them an email, wait a few days and then call them. Did you get my email? Did you think about it? And then go to a board meeting and during the public comment section, get up. They probably will not respond to you, right, Sue?
No, they won't.
But at least if they hear from people in the community, they get elected. And I think that the issue that Charlie was talking about, the levy issue, is so important because this is flipping the responsibility. One of our districts that is part of a plaintiff district in our lawsuit is Cleveland Heights University Heights. And one of our steering committee members is a board member up there, Dan Hines. He told me that they had to pass 2 levies in that district to make up for lost revenues to vouchers because they lost $27 million to vouchers there. And he went out door to door for the levies, right? And he told me on the second levy, the public awareness had grown so much about the voucher drain that he had people at the door saying, thank you for fighting the vouchers and protecting my tax dollars. Because this is a tax drain. As you can see, it's gonna flip over to you as property owners to pay for this, to make up the difference. And meanwhile, the private school operators are off to the bank and the families are getting refunds and rebates.
And as far as funding, there's a lot of nuances to it. We have a note that the state funds UA $12,721. Enrollment is 6,232. So that comes out to an average of $2,041 per student. My understanding when Andy Geisfeld met with this group and gave Jim the numbers, the treasurer for UA, he gave the base level per pupil cost. And Charlie, you can speak to this specifically. That funding for particular students might grow depending on special needs, depending on costs. I also received information through the CUP report that some of the funding the state gives is actually invested. When you look at an average, I guess I'm
I
not
will let Jim answer this.
really answering this question, so I'm gonna pass it over to you. The funding question, base level cost of $585 that Andy Geisfeld, the treasurer, gave to our group versus looking up the data and saying you divide it out, it's an average of $2,041 per student. How does that differ from base
Well,
cost?
a number.
Because it is very confusing.
Yeah, there are a number of things. First of all, the state does give every school district, including Arlington and Worthington, restricted monies that may not be able to be spent on general education, for special programs and for one thing. So when you look at the gross amount, that might be very restricted money that can only be spent for certain things. Secondly, this is I think is the base amount for children without special needs. And the formula does provide for additional money for children with special needs of various kinds, and there are all kinds of tiers for that. But everything I've ever seen is that 585 is the amount that and is comparable to the $8,407 because that's what every kid gets at a voucher school. And then obviously, for example, the autism vouchers, I'm sorry, I cannot use the autism vouchers are 29, a little over 29, almost $30,000 now. But
Okay.
yeah, but we're not, that's not factored into the 8,000.
Let's not mix up apples and oranges here. That's a basic aid number. That's the basic aid. That's how much Upper Arlington is getting for a basic child per pupil. $8,407 is what a voucher gets for a high school student in a voucher school. Now, you can start mixing the apples and oranges if you want, but keep in mind that private schools also receive funding from two other line items in the budget. One is called auxiliary services, the other one is called administrative reimbursement. Those amount to hundreds of dollars, possibly more. Combined, those two line items combine more than $585 in basic aid for your student. Third, we are paying private school, we are paying, as Charlie said, to transport charter and private school students. So that money's coming into Upper Arlington, but that's not being spent to educate Upper Arlington children in public schools. That's being spent on gas and buses and bus drivers and other things. So there's a lot, and so again, some people will try to, take like, oh, we're gonna divide the number and make it real simple and inflate that number. But that's mixing apples and oranges. It's much more complex than that. That's the basic aid number. That's the number.
Oh, yeah,
Let me,
yes.
that direct payments that Dennis is talking about amounts to about $225 to $250 million a year for private schools. And then, that's over and above the voucher. But whether it's $2,000 or $500 is not the point. The point is, voucher's getting $8,400. There's a lot of distance there between 2,000 or whatever. Yeah, there's another point I want to make here. And I want to really emphasize this, and it has to do with the separation of church and state. I'm a person of faith. A large percentage of my income, this is nobody's business, but I just want to illustrate. Large percentage of my income goes to the church, okay? I resent, in addition to my support of the church, having my tax money go to some other faith group. That's just unconscionable in my opinion. And particularly since our Constitution, I want to emphasize this, says no religious or other sect, that is a religious sect or a secular sect, whether it be the supporters of Hitler or the supporters of Satan or supporters of any other. No religious or other sect or sect shall ever have any exclusive right to or control of any part of the school funds of this state. Now, what part of that doesn't the legislature understand? It takes some thought to misunderstand that.
It's a great segue to.
Well, let me finish here. This whole erosion of the wall of separation of church and state is this voucher system is a part of that erosion. And this erosion is going to come back and bite us as a social order. Anytime the church and state get together, the government loses and the general population loses. Read the history and read the current history of other countries with regard to that. Folks lose. Average person loses when church and state collude on these kind of issues.
The brilliant Bill Phillips. Well, I can attest to being at the Ohio State Fair, passing out those fans, please take some, in these bags when it was about 100 degrees. And Bill was there with me all day and then going over to his church booth group and working that. So yeah, he's amazing. Here's a question. What happens if the group lawsuit wins? What happens if it fails? Then what?
I'm gonna take this on as a law professor and compare it to the Duroff case. The remedy being sought in this lawsuit is really easy for the courts to administer. The remedy being sought in the Duroff case was very difficult. To order the General Assembly to appropriate more money for schools or to lock up legislators if they don't, that's really hard to do. And that's ultimately the Ohio Supreme Court said, look, what you're doing is unconstitutional, but we're not gonna, it's up to you to get it constitutional. We've told you what it takes, less reliance on local property taxes, but we're not gonna do anything about it and put the courts out of the business doing it. This lawsuit, on the other hand, is just stop funding these kinds of vouchers. That's easy. This is something courts do every single day that they're open, is enter injunctive relief telling a defendant, stop doing what you're doing. That's a whole lot easier than positive relief. Do something. You gotta start building something. You gotta start appropriating money. That is hard to do. Courts have a hard time to do that with that. So if this lawsuit wins, it's not gonna be like the Raw. It's not gonna be, okay, we won, but the courts won't do anything about it. I have no doubt the court will order them to stop funding these kinds of vouchers, and that will be the end of it. And if they do, then it's easy. It's a negative as opposed to start spending more money on schools. That's a really hard order for a court to enter, although many states courts did.
Is it also true that if one of the 5 counts is ruled on in favor of, the lawsuit is victorious or it's successful? You have to win on all 5 or 1?
Only need to win on one. It's possible it could impact the remedy. So for example, it's religion, it might be, you can't fund religious.
Okay.
But I personally think this lawsuit's gonna be, successful. But it's gotta be well funded. It needs the support of 611 school districts, including a
But
partner.
I kind of have one thing beyond the lawsuit, because I think in the end, the reason Matt Huffman says what he says, he can do whatever he wants, the reason they don't care what that says is because they don't think it politically impacts them. So the other place I would go beyond school boards to get them to join the lawsuit is every single Democrat running for state representative, this should be part of what they talk about.
Yeah.
Right now.
Right.
We want future legislators in the, whether every Democrat wins we don't know what's gonna happen, it's gerrymandered, they're not all gonna win. But what we want in the future is the data and the narrative on this to be very clear so that when a Republican in the future is asked to vote on this kind of thing, they're kind of scared. Because in Little Adams County, where my wife grew up, they would say, why the hell are you crushing the Green Devils of North Adams High School for a bunch of rich people in Hamilton County and Cincinnati? We have to make this politically unpopular.
In
And the best-
Texas, they
Right,
don't.
in Texas,
Let's give the homage to Republicans in Texas. Go Texas Republicans.
exactly. They understood that this is, we have to convert this from something no one knows about, or we start debating 500, 2,000. That's losing in the end. We have to make this toxic. And it is toxic if we explain it well, so that again, in the future, Andrew Brenner is sitting in the middle of some amazing school districts in Delaware County. We should make it really hard for him to vote to undermine them in the future. And the best way to do this, I think, is if all of us start to get our state reps that we know, other state reps running. Allison Rousseau has done a great job. I think there are 95 state reps running out of 99. There's no better issue for a state rep in rural Ohio to talk about than this issue. But we need to do a better job of making sure they've got 3 or 4 talking points, every community forum, every editorial board, all of it. This is the biggest issue I think they can talk about in many places where there are a lot of other issues that will be tougher. So we've got to inject this into broader politics than even just state school boards.
In more than 60 counties in this state, there is no private school that can accept vouchers. And so representatives and senators that represent those constituents have voted against the financial interests of their constituents by diverting money from their local public schools when there's no benefit for a single constituent in their district, because there just isn't any voucher school for them to go to. I mean, I can't understand why any rural school representative, but we gotta win in the court of public opinion, not just in the legal courts.
Are they hoping to build schools? That's what I would be worried about. Are they selling
But
that?
my worry is the next phase is that is all of a sudden, for people who want to make profit, that's a market opportunity. And that's when you start to see low flying, for-profit, ECOT style, white hat style schools that show up in Adams County and say, oh, we can give you, we can give you a new school and it won't be nearly as good as the school where families have gone through for generations. So that's the next phase, is trying to fill that gap. And that's why it should scare us all that the next capital bill, Matt Huffman is talking about funding capital support for new private schools. So yeah, they'll fill that gap quickly, and a whole lot of people are already, I'm sure, looking at this as a way to make a lot of money, just like ECOT and just like Whitehead.
And we're wrapping up, but as I hear this, there is a term that Senator Huffman has coined called school choice deserts. And he refers to rural Ohio as school choice deserts, and he's going to put capital improvement, bills in the State House to be passed so they can use our tax dollars to build private schools in rural areas. So.
David, I want to thank you for the call to action at the state level, but I'd like to see us start in our own backyard. Let's get up Arlington on this lawsuit, okay? We need everybody in this room to help us. And once we do it, we'll watch the other high-performing districts follow suit, because they watch what we do here.
And you're collecting the sheets?
Yes.
There are, if you look at your handout with the checkoff boxes, there's a basket. In a minute, we'd like to wrap up. Betsy, you have some final comments?
Can I say one thing? I was on city council once, and county commission. If this many people showed up at a meeting, demanding one thing, I would be really worried. The newer I was, the more worried I would have been. So, yes, this number of people, each of you add 1 or 2 other people, email, show up. I'm telling you, I haven't been in the position of the people you're talking to. It makes a massive difference to have a crowd this size. So I think you can absolutely get it done with the crowd you're building tonight.
I'd like to put some emphasis on the facility program. We have a massive facility program that was generated by the Jerome litigation, and is a product of Jerome litigation. And so far, after, here's a quarter century, we've had a building program in progress. Only half of the school districts have been fully served with that building program. And there are at least 100 districts that haven't even gotten an offer of any facility money. And so without the public system being fully accommodated, it would be absolutely insane for us as a state to start funding private school construction, and that's on Huffman's agenda, so, just know that that's going to happen. The Buckeye Institute, that's Americans for Prosperity group, they're out talking for us, crowing for, we need to get public money into private construction. A lot of people thought that once we get universal vouchers, that's all they want. Well, now, they have a bill in the legislature to fund non-chartered, non-public schools, schools that don't even have, and that's another $300 million. So, this fight is bigger than most of us think.
Well, I would like to, before we do a final round of thank you, say that this panel has traveled the state of Ohio tirelessly for 2 years. And this lawsuit is the one opportunity to stop the voucher explosion and expansion and stand up for the Ohio Constitution and the rights of all of our public school children, our communities, our democracy. So thank you, Charlie, Dennis, Bill, and David Pepper. Thank you for everything you've been doing for 2 long years.
Everybody in this room would just share what you learned tonight with 1 or 2 people, it'll grow. So, thank you again for coming. And if you have more questions, we do have to be out of this building by 8 o'clock. So, we do need to wrap it up, not because we want to, but because we have to.
And
So-
does anyone
borrow this book? This is a fascinating book, probably got the public school. Help yourself and go out and say hello.
Someone take your class. That's great. Thank you. He's getting better. He's a lot better. Just email me at opinions about.